Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar. Today we are going to be talking about Instana's APM plugin for Grafana and some best practices around building application monitoring dashboards. My name is Adrienne Lindsay. I work on the marketing team here at Instana. I'd also like to introduce our speakers. Michael Kroom is our senior product manager, and Justin Roberts is our senior solutions architect. So I would like to kick things off by handing the mic over to Michael. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thanks a lot, Adrian. As Adrian said, we will go through the presentation through the Grafana plugin. Okay, Instana and Grafana. So first of all, most of you know Instana, and hello to every customer there. So nice that you're here. But let me just briefly introduce you to what is Instana and why it's there. So this is a screenshot of a rather big environment in Instana. And as you all are working in that space, you know, IT is getting more and more complex. And with the rise of microservices and even serverless coming, and in general, modern IT architectures that are able to deliver fast value to customers, the dependencies are rising. And this is actually where Instana comes in with the automatic discovery, with the tracing, and with the full stack visibility, which generates a load of information. And all that load of information is needed, and then Stan comes into action in order to make sense out of it and to help you manage your environments and hopefully be more successful. So that's us. That's why we're here. We were founded not long ago by a couple of veterans in the industry. And we are headquartered in the Silicon Valley, and our development and support center is mainly in Germany. Actually, we already are evolving beyond that, so we now have distributed development and support worldwide, and also a couple of support in the field. A couple of rough numbers, but like said, we are recording this, so you can review that once you want. So let's focus a bit on what are the challenges if we speak about modern IT environments and complex environments. So it does not help only to have tracing. It does not help to only have metrics for infrastructure or for certain components. What is really the complexity of managing modern IT stacks is that it is very diverse. So you not only have Java, you have a couple of languages. You don't only have one type of database, you have different types of database. But then you have hosts. They might be in the cloud, they might be on-premise, there might be small instances, big instances. You run a certain container set. Then you run middleware on it. You even have clusters and then services, and all that in orchestration needs to somehow serve the customers the best possible service, while it's constantly changing because there's innovation going on and agile practices are applied in order to deliver value fast. So that is pretty complex. And again, this is something Instana is built for, to monitor everything from the user down to each single database statement, including the full stack of the infrastructure. Some customers are already seen on this call. So again, hello to that. That is just a small list of logos that we are proud to say are our customers. And what we've seen with those customers is that they said, okay, that's pretty nice that you gave me all the information. The auto discovery actually helps me a lot, that you find all the information, that you help me monitor everything. But I do need dashboards, because there are certain informations I want to have in a customized way, and help me with it. So we said, okay, what do you use? And a very common answer was Grafana. So we use Grafana for our dashboarding. And actually, we aggregate a lot of information already into Grafana. And we said, okay, how about we think about that and build a plugin for Grafana? So here we are. That's the reason for the webinar. Grafana is like, for those who are new to Grafana, an open source project that is also in the CNCF, and we have then the open source dashboarding or data analytics tool. It's very popular. You can do a lot with it. So if you're not familiar, just go to grafana.com and make yourself familiar. I highly recommend that. So this is a common picture that we also see with our customers, and this is just an example of the nice Grafana dashboards you can have. And the good news is, and this is what Justin will show you, with just a couple of clicks and a bit of editing, you are now able to use Instana as a data source and populate your information, the information out of Instana into Grafana, and then do the custom dashboarding. And with that, I'm happy to hand over to Justin, who is now showing you how it really works.
Perfect. Okay. What I actually wanted to do at first was kind of just show kind of the art of the possible. Remember, this is a new release for us. In the last few weeks, I've been working with a number of customers who've wanted to visualize multiple different data sets. And of course, Instana provides an absolute wealth of information. You're constantly looking at, your own sort of metric dashboards. You're looking at information that we're surfacing automatically with our AI and our curated knowledge. And customers are sort of saying to me, "Well, how do I get this? How am I actually able to show this in my my environment?" And this was an example dashboard that was created, and there's a few things I'm just going to point out on here. I'm looking at sort of simple metric views. I'm looking at some external data that they had around business transactions that they wanted to line up on a time series to see if they can correlate between maybe dips in revenue compared with maybe a technical event like a rise in latency or a rise in errors. On here, I also have some comparison charts for my my different sort of services that I'm actually showing here. I can see instantly highlight my highest service for latency. I've also got some sort of more traditional sort of infrastructure metrics. I've got a sort of a traffic light view for some Kubernetes information that we're actually going to be exposing in our sort of up and coming release of Kubernetes environment monitoring, and as well as some simple sort of graphs around the number of instances that are actually showing. So I wanted just to show you the art of the possible, and we're not going to be able to do all of this today, but we'll at least start to dig in. And I want to, the idea for this is not to do everything. The idea is to, just to give you some food for thought, to say, okay, well, what kind of data do I want to expose in this, and really, what data is going to be most useful to my DevOps guys, to the people who are going to be consuming this. So before I start, I'm going to need a small shopping list of a few things that are going to help me get my Grafana dashboard up and running. So firstly, a Grafana instance. Okay, so you probably maybe 90% of you already have this, and you've probably got it on site. It's on your big screens. It's within your within your sort of your operational console somewhere. Okay, but if you haven't got this, there's a couple of things you can do, a couple of ways you can get an instance. I really like the online hosted Grafana version. It's very easy to set up. You get 5 free dashboards. We've been using it for sort of demoing. I'll demo on that today, but there is kind of a sort of a commercial version that follows on that, more users, more dashboards, etc. So that's great. That's one way of doing it. Secondly, of course, you've probably got one already up and running in your own environment. Thirdly, it's actually quite easy to spin up on a on a Kubernetes cluster or on just on a single Docker instance if you wanted to have a play around with it. Functionality is exactly the same. We require version 3 or higher, but I think we're up at version 5, even if that's in beta at the moment, I think. So, we should be in a good place to support you. Secondly, you're going to need the plugin. It is on the Grafana Marketplace. I'll show you that shortly. You can download that. You install it either just one click if you're using the hosted environment, or you can run it from the CLI if you're running this in your own environment. So they're the two things that you're going to need from Grafana. Thirdly, the URL of your instance, your Instana instance, as well as an API key to actually access the data. And again, I'm going to go through that. And then finally, and I think possibly the most important. If you're already an Instana user, you're probably pretty good with this already. But you're going to need some knowledge of dynamic focus, which is really our query language for search and filtering data. And I just thought I'd just take a second just to mention it, because of course I'm absolutely certain that, again, many of you on here have already used dynamic focus, but as there is a real sort of large amount of data that's ingested into your Instana environment, you need a way to quickly be able to search and filter and figure sort of laser sharp focus on exactly the pieces of data that you're interested in. The good thing about dynamic focus, it's not a language to learn. It's a Lucene syntax, so it's very easy to sort of pick up, simple things like I've got down here entity type AWS for getting some of my my AWS metrics, or for a particular zone or something like that we could use. It accepts logic, so I can have and or not kind of Boolean syntax in there. We can also use regular expressions in there as well. So this should be stuff that's kind of very familiar or easy for most of us to get to grips with. So if you don't spend much time with dynamic focus, then have a go. I mean, we're here to help. We have a support team who would be only too happy to send you cheat sheets. We've got some good documentation on this. So if you need some help with this, please do reach out and ask one of the team to help. And finally, the thing I quite like about dynamic focus also that the customers find useful is the fact that if you find a query that you use and you're going to use it frequently, then you can save it and you can share it with colleagues and say, hey, this is how I identify my my 5 Tomcat servers that are sitting in these microservices that are sitting in this cluster that are sitting on these hosts. So it's really important to just to understand a little more about dynamic focus. But anyway, a little more of that as we go through. What I wanted to do first was to just to start at the Grafana site. First thing we're going to really need to do is grab the plugin so we can start to build some dashboards. So you'd expect we have our, move this over here slightly, we have our Instana plugin. You can see a small icon of Stan there to grab just by clicking through. What I can do is, let me just move this across here, bear with me. Yeah, so I can, if I'm using a hosted version of Grafana, simply just install the plugin here. Or if I'm using something that's on premise or running in one of my containers, I can just use the CLI to grab that. It's very straightforward. There is actually another option. I can manually download the zip file from GitHub and unpack it into my plugins directory. Most of the customers that I've worked with are using either the CLI or they'll use it in a hosted kind of environment. So I've got my my data source. Okay. What I'm going to do now at this point, I'm actually going to jump over to my environment. So this is it. I already created this Instana demo.grafana.net. And I've actually got a pre-built data source, but I'm going to build a new one here just for just for fun for today, just so you've had some experience of how this actually works. So the first thing, of course, what I'd need to do is gather my plugin, and my plugin should already be here. And we can see there's my data source. This is Stan. Okay. The second thing I need to do is actually set up a new data source. So I've already got one here, but there's a reason for me creating more than one. Okay, because we could have multiple data sources in the same environment. So I could have a connection to my production instance. I could have a connection to my staging instance, or maybe to my development instance. And the cool thing about that is, of course, that I can mix and match different metric series in the same pane of glass. Okay, so we have some partners who do managed services, for example, that have multiple customers, and they want to have a look at basically the same set of metrics across multiple customers. This would be the ideal way of doing it. Just set up a separate data source for each of those. But for the rest of us that are not managing multiple customers, this is a good way to answer the question, well, how is this service performing pre-production? How is this service performing in production? So it's a good sort of basis for a for a comparison type chart. So I'm going to start. I'm going to create a data source. Okay. So I'm going to create my new data source, and I should, if my plugin's installed and working correctly, I should be able to create an Instana data source at this point. And I can call it whatever I choose. Let's call it webinar in this case. Okay, so I've got my data source. I need these two pieces of information that I mentioned earlier. The URL of my my Instana tenant, so whether this is on-premise or whether this is something that we host for you. So I need that first, and I need my API token. So if I go back to actually my test environment here, for example, I can see I have the URL, okay, and I will also need to create a API key. So if I pop down here, select my settings, access control, API tokens. Okay, and I'd actually created one called A_JR webinar here, for example. But if I wanted to create a new one, simply, that's all I need to do. Call it something, and I get a token. I don't need to give it any special permissions. Okay, so just one out of the box will work just fine. So I'm going to use this one. So I've got my API token, and I've got my my instance, my Instana instance. Okay, so I actually have those already copied in, just because I didn't want to waste any time. Okay, so with those in place, I should be able to save and test, and I get this successfully connected. So I'm ready to build dashboards now. I have my my data source. I've called it webinar again. Just to reiterate, could be my pre-production environment, could be my my production environment, could be staging, anything really. Okay, so now I've got that in place, I can go back and start to think about building dashboards. So, okay, first thing I need to do is decide, well, how am I going to visualize this? Is this going to be a single statistic? Is this going to be some kind of gauge? Is this going to be a graph? I've actually used the basic visualizations on here, but actually, again, if I go back to my my Grafana site, I can actually see I've got panels. And there are actually a lot more that you could use. Heat maps here, for example. You can see a clock on there, a pie chart, whatever you really want to use. And I'm sure most of you have your favorite sort of visualizations that you're already using, but you can download them and, pull our data in, providing the data sets sort of fit correctly there. You're not going to have any problems there. So I'm actually just going to use the graph in this case. So create the graph in this case, and hit E, the letter E, to edit. There is actually also another way of editing at the top there, for example. And now I can pick my data source. And I've actually got two in there. They actually both connect to the same place, but this was just to highlight that I can pick, my my production or webinar and have those sort of mixed or actually on the same, in the same view. Okay, so I'm going to pick my webinar view, and you'll notice something here at the bottom. So this is really the main configuration for the Instana plugin. I've got a query, I've got a class or a type of metric, and then I've got the actual metric. So first thing I need to do is really figure what I want to pop in this query field. And really, this is where this boils down back to dynamic focus. Okay, so the idea is that, again, if you've not used this or seen this before, at any point, if I wanted to drill into some very sort of specific information, entity dot type is RDS, maybe. So I'm looking at maybe some information from my one of my RDS servers that's running. So the platform as a service. It's running in there. It's running in Amazon. So I can use that dynamic focus query to get at that piece of information that I'm looking for. And there are a number of ways of doing this. It's all type ahead, so it's should be very intuitive for you to work with. If I'm looking for a particular zone, I can just start typing it forward and it will give me that information. What is great about this is, actually I have a few here. So if I was looking just for my web services, I could type in entity type web service, okay? And that dynamically will go and look for the class of metric that we're actually creating. So I've got services there, and actually all the metrics that I'm gathering here. Remember this, initial implementation of the plugins really focused around metric gathering. And one tip I will give you, if you notice that this is blue, the outline here is actually blue, that means that the query was actually successful. If I put something that couldn't be found, or something that just didn't look right to here, I would actually get a sort of a red view in here, or it just wouldn't highlight blue. So we can have a little play around with that. Of course, let me just, I don't know, let's look at my latency on there. Point, for example, click on here, and I should get some metrics. Okay, so there's my very first view. So very simple, straightforward way of automatically formatting my my time series, formatting the all of the series information based on my web service names. So very straightforward to work with. I'm working actually with of course the date time picker for Grafana. Of course, I can set that up here. So the last 6 hours, for example. I can also set to refresh. On here, I probably wouldn't recommend, sort of refreshing more than sort of 30 seconds or something like that. If you want real-time data, the Instana environment is probably the best place to get that. We're going to notify you of issues within sort of 3 seconds, things like that. So you get the idea. Okay. What I also wanted to show you very quickly is the fact that this is again completely dynamic. So I've got some info on here, but if I sort of was interested maybe in something for my website, so some end user monitoring, pop that in there. I already get now a class of metrics, which is my website, and the metrics that I'm actually collecting as well. So this is completely dynamic. So instantly I've switched that from being a metric around the service to a metric around sort of end user monitoring. And there's all sorts of things I can add in here. If I was interested, for example, in a zone, and a zone is of course a way that we can group together a set of machines that are performing a task. Really as like kind of like an availability zone, for example. I can drop that in here. And instantly it will find all of the things that are relevant to that zone, which is a search cluster. And of course, actually, I know that that's my Elasticsearch environment. So I can pick that, instantly grab something like refresh count. I don't know if I'm going to get any metrics from there. And instantly then that's converted now to being a view of my my refresh count across all of my Elasticsearch nodes. So you get some of the idea of the the power and the kind of the flexibility of this. So again, moving back, if I just wanted to create a very simple view of all of my services just for comparison, I'm going to create this one. If you are interested in generally in the metrics that we're collecting, it's very straightforward to grab all of those. We have an API that shows all of these metrics that are actually exposed. Okay. So if you want to use them for Grafana, they're here. If you want to use them for some other purposes, again, we have a well-documented API to work with. Okay, so really, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a flavor for how this works, how flexible it can be. If I wanted to show, for example, a different type of visualization, it will boil down to exactly the same kind of process. Grab a single stat, okay, edit that stat, pull the webinar data source in. Maybe it's one that I already know. I can actually do some free text typing in here, health check. Maybe I could look at my my instances, or my in this case, grab the instance count. Okay, I've got an error here. So just one of the things to mention. Okay, so I'm actually using the wrong series type for this. Whenever you see an error, and this is a real sort of environment that we're expecting a single series of data coming back, and actually we're returning multiple series back in this case. So we'll go back, edit here again, and I'll return back a single series. So that's returned me back an 8. So that's my current number of instances that are running. And I can do all sorts of cool things with this at this point. I can turn that into a gauge. Okay. I can add thresholds with colors. 9, 10, 12, invert that. So that shows me, a traffic light view of any time that drops beneath those metrics that I'm going to see this. And there are things like alerting that's already built into Grafana. You're probably using some of this already. I really just wanted to give you that kind of that top level highlighted view of the vast amount of metrics that we can gather and how we can sort of help you visualize them. I did have maybe one other thing I just wanted just to kind of wrap this up with. 1 second. Just to say, really to kind of just to finish this conversation off really on this. I wanted to say there was a couple of things. You can have some sort of really focused sets of data by using sort of dynamic focus with this information. It's a great way to sort of creatively show this info that Instana is constantly gathering and aligning with your environment. Use dynamic focus to actually drill into the specific areas that you're looking for. Spend a little time working with dynamic focus. You will get a lot out of it if you just put a little bit of time into gathering that info. And finally, make some beautiful dashboards. We are here to help. If you need help, please don't hesitate to ask. But remember, this is what we set out to do, was to be able to expose this your APM data, your APM metrics in Grafana. And I think as we start to move forward, we will add more features as time goes by.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Michael and Justin. It's time to move over to the Q&A portion of the webinar. The first question that we have is, what level of data granularity do we support with this?
So, of course, as you know, with Instana, we have 1 second metric granularity for gathering data. Actually, the smallest that we can show in Grafana is 5 seconds. So, obviously you're going to see that more detail when you look actually into Instana, but 5 seconds is great for looking at sort of trends and for sort of aligning between different data sets.
Great, thank you. So we have time for one more question. The final question is this plugin available for all installations, such as SaaS or on-prem?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. The latest version of SaaS, of on-prem, will support this as well. So, absolutely the same functionality, and it keeps with our sort of design goals always of being able to provide the same set of functionality between on-premise or the SaaS platform.
Great, thank you. So that concludes our webinar, but before we log off, I would like to make one final note. We will be hosting these monthly training webinars to enable all of you to utilize the Instana solution and make the most of the powerful application monitoring that it provides. So if you have a suggestion for what we should talk about next, feel free to shoot over an email to our Director of Customer Success. His name is Tom Blossom, and his email address is displayed on the screen. And with that, we'd like to thank you again for joining our webinar. And if you have any other questions, let us know. Thank you and goodbye.